to click on the Go Live button. So we are going live. Great. Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to the Foreman community demo. I'm Nofar, an active developer within the Foreman project, and I'll be hosting the demo today. As usual, we have some updates to share with you and some new things we've been working on to share with you. But before we get started, this demo is all about sharing the latest updates and answering your questions. We want everyone to participate, so feel free to ask away. Drop your questions or comments in the IRC at the Foreman, or use YouTube live chat. We're tuned into both channels, so don't hesitate to speak up. Okay, so our agenda for today includes 5 topics in total. We have 3 demos from the Foreman and the Catella team, and 1 special topic from Marek, saved for last. Okay, I will start quickly with the community update. So I would like to remind you, for those who missed the Foreman Ansible Models Collection Deep Dive by Scanny, it is now available on YouTube, and I will share the link to the YouTube video in the chat and in the video. And the next announcement is about the Foreman 3.9.1 release. We're fixing the latest bugs, small issues. We are hoping to get it done by the end of the week. We'll give it a few more days. Hope I'm not being too optimistic. But you can keep up after the details in the community. We have a post about it, and we will let you know there about the official release. Hopefully today, yeah. Okay, so one last announcement is about the FOSDEM and the config management conferences next year, well, in a few months, in February in Brussels. As usual, we are planning to attend both conferences. We hope to see you there. In FOSDEM, we will share a booth with the Ansible team on the first day, and the second day we, of course, will be there for the users. So we hope to see you then. And config management, the details are now being discussed. We will have a room and a fringe event on the last day. Okay, yeah, I guess we can move on to our first demo for today by Ian, how to consume synced Ansible collections via Galaxy. So Ian, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Nofar. I get my screen shared. Okay, so I have just a little bit of a PSA, you might call it, today about your Ansible collection repositories. So a while ago, I had some back and forth with a user who was a bit confused about how to consume the content. And let me just share what I have here. So I have an Ansible repo right here with a few Ansible collections. And if you go down, you can see the publish.dat link. And you might notice, if you've been using Catella for a little while, that the publish.dat link is a little bit different. I'm going to highlight it here. So you can see, instead of starting with /pulp/content, it starts with pulp_Ansible/Galaxy. And it also ends in this API. It also ends in this API endpoint. So what some people might try is they might try consuming at the pulp content endpoint if that's what they're used to. And what you see if you go to that pulp content endpoint is something like this. Just a bunch of tar files. And when you consume this Ansible content, you'll be using Galaxy, and if you point your Ansible Galaxy at this, it'll get all confused and it won't know what to do. So this is really just the backend content storage for the collections themselves. what you really want to make sure you do is you use this API endpoint with the pulp Ansible Galaxy prefix. And so if you click on it, you'll come to something like this, kind of a Galaxy related page. It shows some API versions that are available. This is all coming straight from pulp. And one bug that we actually need to work on is this login button right now doesn't do anything, but we could have it actually allow you to log in as the admin user. However, that's not entirely helpful right now because you can't even protect Ansible collection content. It's all open. But regardless, if you click on this, you'll get a gross 404. Just a heads up. But anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. So let me just show you what I mean here. So if you want to consume this content, you might do it via like the Ansible Galaxy, like a configuration where you add this stuff among your other sources. However, just for an example, I'll show you how to do it in a single command line. So in my terminal here, I'm running an Ansible. Whoa, the terminal just broke. Give me a sec. All right, there we go. So I have a Ansible Galaxy collection install command. You specify the collection you want to install, and here it's the Foreman.operations. And then you can provide a server. And the server that I have here is the same endpoint that you see on your repository page. And so when I run that, I ran a force, so it downloaded the content, and it grabbed the tar file. You can see here. And now it does appear to have grabbed it from the pulp Ansible Galaxy endpoint. And I'm speculating that that probably does a redirect to the pulp content, but I might be wrong. So anyway, just keep in mind, if you want to consume your Galaxy things, make sure you do it at this API endpoint with pulp_Ansible and Galaxy. And that is all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I don't see any questions, so I guess we can move on to our next topic. Yeah, this topic should be mine. Yep, is great. So I need to reshare my screen. Okay. Okay, it looks good. Yeah, also on YouTube. Okay, so sorry, I need to share this screen. Okay. I'm sorry. No. Choose the wrong screen for some reason. I will do it from beginning. Maybe I will just share the entire window. Okay. Okay, yeah, so sorry about that. Okay, I would like to share with you a new snippet for the subscription manager setup, which will be introduced in Foreman 3.8 release. And I'm going to start with a little background about the subscription manager. So this is a tool for managing the Red Hat subscriptions on Linux operating systems. And basically, it gives us the ability to register our system within Red Hat and then basically manage all our subscriptions. In Foreman, we use the subscription manager in a process of host registration, which I would talk to you about here. So in Foreman, we call host registration basically the process when we add a new machine into Foreman, and then we can manage it. And this process involves capturing the host information and setting up a secure connection so we can talk to the host via SSH or other, basically via SSH, and run all the necessary tasks on this host. And the methods we have today to register the host, we have two methods. The first one is by using the global registration template, which most of you may be more familiar with the curl command we're generating. And what this curl command does is just running the global registration template on the host we are trying to register. But there's another process, another scenario where we use the host, the subscription manager, and we do the host registration, which is part of the host provisioning process. So I will first talk about host registration during provisioning, and there's an image you're supposed to see. I wonder why it's not visible here. Yeah, maybe I needed to click it again. Okay, so basically what we are seeing here is the Red Hat register snippet, and this snippet is being used during the host provisioning process in Foreman. And the issue is that this snippet is using a deprecated RPM, the Catella CI RPM, for the subscription manager configuration. And the issue with that is that because it's deprecated, it's not being supported in new versions of operating systems. So for example, new versions of Rails, and it can cause us issues. So we have another method to do the process of host registration in Foreman, and this is done via the global registration template, as I mentioned before. We can use it to register an existing host into Foreman, and in this template, we have all the necessary code to do the subscription manager setup in Foreman. Yeah, so what are our goals here? So the first one, as you can see, we would like to remove the use of the deprecated Catella CA RPM from the Red Hat register snippet, which is used in the provisioning process. And instead of that, we have the necessary code in the global registration template to do that. So for us not to have duplicate code, we can somehow use this necessary code instead. And this is how we came up with the idea to implement a new snippet, which is called the subscription manager setup. And this new snippet contains the necessary code from the global registration template to do the subscription manager configuration. And this new snippet is being used both in the provisioning process for registering a host and also in the registering host process, which basically you're familiar with the curl command we're using to do that. So both processes are using the same snippet, which is introduced in the new Foreman release. To check out more details about the PR implementation, you can go to the host, to go to the post where we, for the demo, you can check the Redmine issue, and it has the PR link assigned to it. This is all for me. I would just like to mention about the testing. So we tested both provisioning process and both host registration process on Foreman, but we haven't tested it for Debian operating system. So this is something we still need to work on. And if someone wants to get involved in this, please feel free to reach out to me. I will work on it with you. I would be happy to contribute to also have support for Debian operating system. And that's all for me. So if you have any questions, please speak up. You can do this now or after the next topic. Okay, I stopped sharing my screen. I don't see any questions so far, so I guess meanwhile we can move on to the next topic and we can get back to questions later if there will be. Yeah, so next topic is by Quinn, container registry token changes in Catella 4.11.
Thanks, Nofar. Hi, everyone. I'm Quinn. Let me get the screen share working really quickly. Unfortunately today, there is no fun demo on my behalf. I just have this rather sad, boring, white PowerPoint, but hopefully the content of this PowerPoint is enough to keep it interesting for you all. So today I'm talking about the changes to our container registry tokens for Catella 4.11. This happened a while ago, so it's not the most up-to-date information, but a lot of people we found were testing with these tokens, so I thought it would be useful to share this information. So the current token system, as of Catella 4.10, we are generating authentication tokens to be used with Docker repositories inside a lifecycle environment. These are generated whenever a user needs authentication, and they're also generated whenever authentication isn't needed, just as part of the process. And they are sent along with repository information for stuff such as podman pool. As per the Docker specs, they are expected to follow certain formats. And a couple users were testing on these tokens, and they noticed that some of the fields were a little inconsistent. There were issues regarding like what format specifically the tokens were using when they were authenticating as a known user versus pulling unauthenticated, stuff like that. And we dug into it a little bit, and we found that we were wildly out of compliance with the OAuth 2 specs that Docker required. So a few fixes were needed to get us up to spec here. We had incorrect formats a couple times. We had incorrectly formatted data in a few fields, and one of the fields was entirely absent. So it was interesting that Podman was happy with these tokens at all. So the fixes are in for 4.11. This slide's a little dense, but it shows everything we changed with them. Both Catella and smart proxies needed changes in order to work with these new tokens. So just going down the list, if you're pulling a repository as an unauthenticated user, we're now setting an expiration time of 3 minutes. I believe that's up from 1 minute, but don't quote me on that. Every time that gets returned is now RFC 3339 formatted. So issued at and expires at are both guaranteed to be RFC 3339. So that should take care of any of the difference in formatting issues. We have a new field, the expires in field. It's an integer number of seconds until the token expires. That is a required field. If I open up this is the OAuth 2 token authentication specs. Expires in is now required, and we're still returning issued at, but it is optional. So there were a couple of changes to the smart proxy down, the smart proxies down from the Catella, where they can accept either version of the token right now. They can accept the old ones or the new ones, or any OAuth 2 token that is compliant with the spec. Given here, we can even omit the issued at time because it's optional, and the server will assume what it has to from the other information in the token. The expires at field is not actually part of the spec, but it was a field that we were returning previously. We're keeping that for now. We did change it to RFC 3339 time, but we're keeping the token field for now. We are planning on removing it in 4.13 or later if it takes longer to get to. It's a pretty easy fix to remove it, but right now it's kept to help with smart proxy upgrades in the future. So that is all the changes, and that is all I have in this presentation. I just wanted to say thanks, and I can take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Quinn. Yeah, I don't see any questions. I think people may be processing all this information. But feel free to ask after. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nofar.
Thank you. No problem. I guess we are ready for our last topic for today. Yeah, which will be by Marek. So the evolution of Foreman in the last 10 years. Very interesting. Can't wait to hear, Marek, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Working on that. And that you can see the right window now. All right. So this is not going to be a functionality demo or a new feature demo. But, you know, in December, people naturally look back and think about what was achieved in the last year. So I did that as well. I just went a bit further than just 1 year. I actually got back to January 2012. And I looked at how Foreman looked at that time. And then I thought, okay, let's take a look at more versions. And I ended up installing various versions of Foreman. And I thought I would show people how it looked. And hopefully we could also see the progress or the achievements we've made. So that's going to be today's demo. And I will start, as I mentioned, with the version from January 2012. That's not even a Foreman 1.0. It's something like Foreman 0.5. And this is the oldest thing that I could install on the CentOS 6, because that was the moment where a gem file was added to the repo. I wouldn't be able to install the dependencies without that. So this is CentOS 6 machine. I think with Ruby 1.8.7, installing many old dependencies like old gems. And this is how it looked like. Just FYI, there was no installer at that time. I think you just install the package. You know, the first thing that you probably notice is that the color isn't blue. It was black back then, which I completely forgot. I was not on this project at that time. I saw some screenshots from the past, but I completely forgot that Foreman wasn't always blue, or the main color wasn't always blue. Another thing that's interesting in here is that we had this dashboard page, which was full of text telling users about, I guess, what's new or how to configure the application. And if we look elsewhere, we see that there was a list of hosts or with default bookmarks, so you could search for a host. There were reports, that means like the reports coming from Puppet, also list of facts, audits, that's a very old feature apparently. So we can see that some architectures were created. For example, here you could go to details and see how it was created. You can see that it wasn't very nice UI at that point, I guess. And there was also this statistic charts. There was still version 0.5. And a few more things, or majority of the things that you would define were actually here under the more. You can notice that there is no login, right? While there was some support for remote user defined by Apache, there was some initial work on permissions. There seems to be no login or no user management even in here, so that's why you don't see any login menu in here. But you could go and create a domain, for example, like this. Very bootstrappy UI, I would say. Well, that was nice that I couldn't even click on the menu because there was some messaging here. But in general, if you look at this, like the bookmarks, that's similar to what we have today, right? So there are still some basics that you probably recognize. And one more thing I wanted to mention, at that time, there was no API. So this was pure UI application, no plugins, just what you see. All right, so let's move to the newer version. This one is going to be from October 2013. I'll start with the way how this was installed. So there was finally an installer, not like you know it from today, but there was this command Foreman generate answers, which was interactive. So you gave it some information if you didn't want to proceed with just all-in-one setup. you could configure various things. So you could disable, enable some features. And then when you were ready, you would just exit like this, I guess, and it would just run the Puppet modules like we do it today with the installer, but this was like really the way we recommend users to do. This was like a separate script to just generate the answers for the Puppet modules, and then you could run the Puppet yourself or trigger it from here, from the script directly. So after a while, I'm going to cancel that, but after a while, you get to the Foreman 1.2. Now this is the login screen. For those who remember that Catalog used to be also a separate application, you could also have configured single sign-on called Signal that looked very similarly. I think this is the first time we actually used some library with UI patterns. I think it was called Alchemy UI or something like that, and this screen actually comes from it. All right, so let's try to log in. And now Foreman is blue already. So this looks definitely more familiar. And the default page after login now became hosts list, right? But we still have the dashboard with a lot of information in here. The menu structure is very similar. Yeah, and I see one question, so I'll answer it right away. Feel free to ask questions during this. I don't have like a strong structure for this presentation. So Maximilian asks or says that he's surprised this is still installable. Well, it is installable with a lot of hacks, and yes, this is running on CentOS 6. I had to add a lot of various crazy repositories to install various old dependencies, but it is installable. We see user management here already, which is nice. And then the menu was basically split into two main categories, configuration and provisioning. And one thing that I wanted to show here was actually if we go to configuration smart proxies, it was possible to add a smart proxy already. This is gradual, I guess. So you had to do this manually, basically. That's the point. So if you create it, then it talks to it, and then you can already look at the existing features in there. You can go and maintain Puppet certificates or outside entries and these kind of things. Let's take a look at how it's looked. Now, this UI was improved comparing to the previous version I showed. So yeah, this looks definitely more closer to what we are used to today, but still different colors of buttons, these kind of things. All right, let's move further. So September 2014, Foreman 1.5 was released, or 153 to be more precise. So the new login screen, and let's take a look at how it looks. All right, so the menu is similar, but you can see the new thing in the navigation. We have unfolding menus, right? So administer really remain for just few things regarding user management and permissions and these kind of things. But everything else moved to these expandable menus. Let me show you one more thing. Maybe I have skipped it in the older version. No, it's yeah, this is already the new permission system. I will return for a moment just to the older version, Foreman 1.2. One thing that I wanted to show you was also the old ways of how we treated the permissions. So there were already these existing roles, and if you go to the detail of that role, there was a predefined set of permissions. Basically, this was all the permissions that were available in the application. There was no filtering. You couldn't say that some user can see only hosts I don't know, from a particular domain. You just gave them view hosts permission, and that was it. Which was nice because it was much simpler. And one thing that we over the time had to drop, because with the new permission system that was not possible, but there was this nice permissions report screen. So basically that show you the table where you see all the permissions and all the roles, and you can see what role can actually do what in your system. So that was a nice page that I remembered. All right, but going back to the newer version, Foreman 1.5, as you see that we have now these permissions. That's the moment where we also supported plugins. By the time installer couldn't yet install them, but you could install them as RPM package and then do some configuration like run migrations manually and seeding and all of that. So some of the permissions here also come from the plugins. And what I wanted to show here in particular, let's go through a few pages here. This is still the textual dashboard, let's say. We still had statistics in here, but they looked, well, I don't have data in here, so I won't show you the nice pie charts, but they were already improved. Maybe let's take a look at audits again. Yeah, that's similar like we've seen in the past. But one thing in particular that I would like to show you is something we called two-pane interface. So, you know, in Foreman, we have a lot of tables of the objects we create. And if you click on one, it basically navigates to the editing of that object. We used to have something called two-pane, which kept you on the page with the table, but just opened the form in the second pane. This was done through Ajax, so it was relatively fast. You could still open that in separate tab, I think, and that would take you to the full page. So basically, this logic was the same, but we were able to actually load it in here. So if you had multiple objects to edit, you could simply switch between them. But I remember it caused several problems, and was the reason why we dropped that. All right, so that was Foreman 1.5. 1.6, I believe, was the version where we also had the support for the plugins in the installer. So it was much easier then to deploy or install plugins with Foreman. And I actually use that in the next version I installed. That is Foreman 1.12. So we jumped to 2016. And the installer looks more like you're used to today. There is still interactive mode. We can take a look at that as well. But I wanted to show the experience was different, and it also was different than what we have today. First, there was some preparatory steps, and then when it actually knows how to compile the catalog, it starts the installation. So there's a progress bar. That's a nice hack that we did around Puppet. We counted the amount of the resources, and based on that, we do the progress in here. But it was not always reliable because the resources are actually created as the catalog is processed. So it usually ended up at 99%, and then it was waiting for a very long time. But yeah, this is similar experience to what we have today. And this is the version 1.12. So let's take a look inside how it looks. The menu didn't change that much, of course, but if we go and look at the dashboard, this is the new dashboard. No longer the textual information, but rather some initial set of widgets that you could even customize. Like if you were not interested in latest events, you could close this. You could add more widgets. You can see that there are widgets actually coming from the plugins. And well, I did it quickly, but I guess you have seen that when I ran the installer, this was the way to enable plugins. That was much easier than manually installing RPMs or Debian packages and then running steps manually. And one thing that I wanted to show, because there was like a boom of these plugins, one nice plugin was called Provisioning Setup. That allowed to configure various objects in Foreman based on the data it got from the installer. So the installer uses Puppet. That Puppet generates some facts, sends it to the Foreman, and based on that, we know some trivia about networking, for example. So if you want to, one of the first operations for provisioning is to define subnet, domain, operating system, link, installation media, provisioning tables, and all of that. So this plugin helped with that. So it knew about networks that are present in there based on the Puppet facts. So you could decide which of the network is going to be used for provisioning. Then you have some values predefined in here, but you could customize that further if you want. Like, for example, it's probably not example.com, but some my domain or something like that. And then it basically generated you the command for the installer. What do you need to run, or what what you need to run in order to get the DHCP server configured, for example. So we use that installer. You couldn't do it from Foreman directly because Foreman runs on the Foreman user, but for this you need to have root permission. And back then, I think we didn't have remote execution. Now this may be actually possible, easier, because our remote execution plugin now differentiates between system host, and it can run jobs on Foreman if you allow it to. There's a separate permission for that. So maybe that's that's something we could revisit, because I think this plugin is no longer maintained and was even dropped from the repos, if I'm not mistaken. But I know that it was very popular at some point. And you could also select installation medium and things like that. And then what it actually does, it creates all these objects for you. So if I go to domains, it created that my domain. It would, if I finish the wizard, it would link it to the right objects, things like that. And one more thing I would like to show is API. Actually, at this point, we had API here. It was version 1, and we had the documentation for all the API resources in here. So that was also pretty cool. This is done by, or this is using API Pi. If you're interested about that project, I think it was created before today's standard tools like Swagger existed. All right, so that was Foreman 1.12. So let's move further. It's going to be a bit bigger jump to Foreman 1.24, which was May 2020. And again, we have a new login screen. I'll just log out here so that you can see that. So this is the login screen we had for a while, and this is the new one, and that's the one that we use still today in the latest and greatest version. So let's get in. Okay. First thing that you notice is that we've changed the navigation. Now it's vertical. So that's one significant change. The other thing is we have the notification drawer. So you can see the notifications. We fetch the notifications from our RSS channel. So whenever there's something new, you would see information in here. And over time, we edit more notifications here. Like, for example, the host has been provisioned, remote execution job has been finished, and these kind of things. All right. What else do we have here? It was still a bit inconvenient. You had to still, after the installation, create the smart proxy manually. I think and you need to remember that it's actually running on some specific port 443. Oh, and then here. All right, we can go to details. And this, I think around this version, we've created new UI in here so that you could see more things. You could even go and see the logs from the proxy. You see what plugins are installed, or what features are enabled in there, what versions they have. All right, and if we go to our API documentation, this was, I think this was the first version where we had Foreman v2 only. That's the last version of API right now. The main change, I think, between API v1 and v2 was how we actually how we reference to other objects. Like if you need to, let's say, from host, you have some link to environment. V2 better define how to link to it through environment underscore ID, for example. I think v1 wasn't consistent with that. Okay, another big jump is to Foreman 2.4. That's 2021. And you can see some tiny changes in the UI. I'm going to switch in between. So look at top right corner here, like small font. Now this looks a bit better. I would say the icons are of the same size. So it was more like a tweaking in terms of the main design. But I think this version looks already like pretty smooth or clean. I mentioned the documentation of API v1 and v2, but now what we had new is also the documentation for the DSL we use in all the templates. So we have the documentation for all the macros, for provisioning templates, for job templates, partition tables. So that was one of the big addition in here. And I think it was in 124, if I go back to here. No, it was maybe older one. I had some data. Yeah, here. If I go to the host detail page, this is the page that we had for a very, very long time, and it didn't really change. Maybe we added a few more information to this table, but that was basically how it looked from early days. And one of the things that we heard many times was there are these two charts, which are not that overly useful, but they take 70% of the page. And going back to that 2.4, this has changed. And finally, we got the, oh, sorry, no, that was a, sorry, that was a new version. So I better get to that a bit later. So 2.4 still had this page. As you can see, that not much really has changed here. As I mentioned, just maybe we added some more rows in here. But if we go to 3.4, then we'll see that the experience is different. So this is the new host detail page. At this version, there were still not that many widgets. So on the overview, we see three main things, but there were more tabs. And here you can see like the other functionality. So we have tabbed navigation here, subtabs as well. And yeah, cards to display overview for the host. Okay, and I guess just to compare, and this is something that people already are familiar with, I guess, is that if we go and look at the, well, 3.9, or 3.9 is going to be released soon, or better to say nightly, so that's really latest and greatest. This is how the installer looks today. So there is no longer this progress bar, but we at least tell you the progress of how many steps are still ahead of the installer to finish. But the result is basically the same as we saw years ago. And just to look at how it looks today, so this is the nightly setup. That's why you see 3.10 develop here. We still have the navigation vertical, but it was a bit redesigned. Maybe just I'll switch again back in between these two. So this is how it looked before. It's how it looks today, and what you will see in 3.9 already. So we have expandable menus here, and there is this new search bar, which was demoed, I think, 2 demos ago, but that's really awesome feature. And if we go and see, I don't know, one of those Foreman hosts we've provisioned in here. Oh no, actually, I'll pick just some. Oh, this all, by the way, runs on the same machine, so it's a bit slow. There are too many Foremans running right now. But let's go to this one. So this is how the host detail page looks today. There's a lot more information. I would say nicer organization of the cards, and also this details tab where you actually have much more information than we ever had before. This can be collapsed if this is not too relevant for you. So that's really, like, I would say, more powerful host detail page. Okay, well, I didn't mention remote execution too much, but maybe that's something that I can show as well. In the older versions, we had this job invocation form where you could customize a lot of things, and it was called Jumpy because it was always jumping, or you had to jump with the cursor, I guess. And this has recently been redesigned. I believe we still have both versions in there, but this is now more like a wizard, where if you are actually changing something that has effect on other fields, maybe we'll see it here in the schedule. Like if I change future execution here, it doesn't jump with the form, but rather adds more step into the wizard. So that's the new experience. Okay, so that was what I had to show, basically. I hope that you got the similar feeling I did when I was looking at these versions. Like, there was a long path, and there was really good evolution. We really started with very small application, without API, without permissions even, and we got to really mature system with a lot of plugins. And I believe that, you know, every version came with some improvements, and that's really great that this is continuously being evolved. I mentioned that first version was 2012. The development started in 2010, I believe, but I wasn't able to start those. But you can see that over those years, we're continuously improving this project, and that's really awesome to see. So that's all I had to show today. I see that there are some comments in the chat, but if you have any questions, then feel free to just ask. I can try to find a page if you're interested in the old versions. So, or any comments or your feelings about what you've just seen, that would be also great.
Thanks a bunch.
Questions. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll just stop. So when was reporting engine added the way it is today, and when was Foreman tasks added? Just curious.
Oh, that's a good question. I know that Foreman tasks, that goes back to at least Foreman 1.5, because we already had remote execution, I think, back then. Oh, I don't have plugins installed here because the installer didn't have the proper support for that. But Foreman tasks was added really soon, because it was also needed for Catalog. To track to track where the issues were with those backends. So that was definitely 1.5 or even earlier. That's for Foreman tasks. The reporting engine, that's a good question, and I don't know from the top of my head. But if you give me just a moment, I'll try to find out from the GitHub, because I know which file we are tracking. That seems like 5 years ago, and that seems to the first version that is tagged in is 1.20.
Nice. Thanks, Marek. Thanks for doing this. All these bootstrap buttons, green. Looks so nice.
Yeah. One thing that is interesting, I don't think we have that today everywhere, but there used to be these help screens which were trying to explain what this object is about. Now we use that rather in the welcome page. Like if you don't have any objects on that page, I think there's some brief description. I don't know if I can. We'll have data everywhere here, I guess. Maybe if I switch to a different organization. But it seemed like the application, probably because back then we didn't have really even a good documentation, the application tried to guide the user a bit more. So that may be something that we could also kind of learn from this experience. But yeah. Cool. Any more questions?
Okay, I guess not. So
Version 0.5 was packaged downstream and sent to like people, customers.
I don't think so. I can't really speak about the entire history, but I know that this project has been created. Well, you know, well, first of all, it has been said here, the two founders are Ohad Levy and Paul Kelly. I know that Ohad was working on this project even before he joined Red Hat, and then somehow it was used as a base for satellite. But I don't think this version ever, this has probably been even like before those thoughts, but I can't really say. On the other hand, actually, comments here I saw from people who I met in Red Hat. So maybe this already was worked on as part of some Red Hat product, but I don't think this version was ever made into any downstream. And I can't really speak for Orcarino as a downstream. Well, we have Maximilian, but I think this old version probably also not, because I've heard about Orcarino much later, I would say.
Okay, I guess that's all. So a big thanks for Marek for taking the time and doing this. By reading and seeing the comments, I see I'm not the only one who enjoyed it. Everyone probably, yeah, had a very a good experience seeing how amazing progress we made in the last 10 years. And we definitely need to keep this video for 2033 to see what will be in the future. I hope, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Okay, so thanks a lot, Mark, and thank you everyone for participating. The next demo is scheduled for, well, next year, January 11th. So we hope to see you then, and we'll wish you happy holidays and a happy new year. And thanks again, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Nofar.